This is the Andy Pollin Hour on Washington's new home for sports. ESPN 630, the sports capital.
It's a Tuesday, yet we have a Tony show today coming up at 11 o'clock. In the meantime, a number of things to look into, including what's going to happen exactly 8 hours from now as the trade deadline ticks down, 6 o'clock this evening. Either Juan Soto will be a Washington National still, or he'll be sent someplace else. I'll get more into that in just a moment here. The Deshaun Watson suspension, if you want to call it that, the tap on the hand, 6 games, number of columnists weighing in on that. And also, I want you to hear what Andrew Brandt said here on ESPN about an hour ago. Really summed it up well. He's an attorney. He's a former front office executive with the Packers, and really laid it out really well. I'll get to that very shortly. And also, Bram Weinstein yesterday talked to Ryan Kerrigan, as Kerrigan has announced his retirement from professional football, and he's kind of hanging around at training camp, kind of deciding whether or not he wants to coach or not. He said at his news conference on Saturday that coaching is where he wants to go next, and he hopes it's in the NFL. But Ron Rivera, who went through a similar thing, played about the same amount of time, took some time off before he decided coaching was what he wanted to do. And it sounds like that's what he's saying to Kerrigan. Hey, before you jump right into this, see if there's something else that you want to do, and if you still want to play, or not play football, he obviously wants to play. If you still want to coach football, you can make that decision in a year or so. So we'll see where that goes. But that was sort of interesting from yesterday, and we'll get more into what's happening out at Ashburn today as they have padded practices. They used to have padded practices all the time, but rules have changed dramatically, and there's only a few times during training camp that you can really go at it in pads, and today is one of those days. All right, the latest on Soto is this, and this is what's being reported, is that the Padres have emerged as a front runner, and that the trade of Soto to the Padres would also include Josh Bell. So this, if it happens, would be similar to what happened last year when Max Scherzer was traded to the Dodgers along with Trey Turner, that you got rid of 2 top guys at that time. Now, the Turner thing was really puzzling last year because he was still under team control for the second half of last year, and they knew they weren't going anywhere, but also for this year. And they decided that, I guess maybe they knew this was going to be a rebuilding year as well, so they shipped him off as well. And so this dealing of the 2 most productive offensive players, and certainly the superstar of the future, that would likely happen, according to reports, that if Soto was traded to the Padres, it would include Josh Bell. There's also a little bit of a tell about the Padres in this. If you did not hear this last night, they made a deal with Milwaukee to get closer Josh Hader, and they included prospects in the deal, but according to ESPN's Jeff Passan, not all the prospects that perhaps Milwaukee wanted were sent, and this is why.
You know who it didn't include? C.J. Abrams, Robert Hassel, James Wood, and Jackson Merrill.
And that's significant because?
Those are all players that the Washington Nationals would love to receive in exchange for Juan Soto.
Aha! So there could be something of a tell there that the prospects that did not go to Milwaukee in the Josh Hader deal could be on ice now as they wait for things to be finalized with the Nationals. But I imagine this goes right down to the deadline. And reports are that the Padres are the front runner with the Cardinals and the Dodgers very much in the mix. And if you're Mike Rizzo making this deal, you're calling each of those teams as you get closer and closer to the deadline and saying, okay, can you up the deal? And also, Rizzo put this out yesterday through various reporters who said that he's not going to make a deal unless he gets what he wants. And with team control of Soto for 2 more years, they're not going to give him away. So the message from Rizzo is you either meet our price or we're holding on to him. And I don't know whether this is significant or not, but I noticed that they did have 29,000 last night for the worst team in baseball. Yes, the Mets draw, and the Mets are a contender. I understand that. But on a Monday night, 29,000 people. Max Scherzer on the mound, I'm sure, had something to do with it, too. But, you got to have somebody that the fans want to see. And for the rest of this year, if Bell and Soto are both gone, I don't know who you go out to see. You certainly don't go out to see Patrick Corbin, who last night in the first inning threw 50 pitches. 50 pitches in the first inning. It was water torture. It was just awful. And he is the worst starting pitcher in baseball. He gave up only 4 runs last night, but he's terrible. He can't pitch anymore. He certainly can't be a starting pitcher. Maybe you keep him around long relief, and they're not going to just cut him loose because they owe him $60 million. And there's also been speculation that in any kind of deal they make for Soto, that they would include the contract of Corbin, but Mike Rizzo said last week that they wouldn't do that because that would weaken what they would get in return. Like, they're not just dumping money just to do that they want to get the most value they can in players in return. So that's not going to happen. But we'll keep an eye on that. Soto last night, and if this is a farewell, other than winning the game, I don't think you could do really any better than this. He had a great throw from the outfield to nail a runner at the plate, and he also hit a home run off of Max Scherzer. And if that's his farewell to Washington, well, that's what it is. He said about last night, he says, I feel good where I'm at. I understand it's a business, and they need to do whatever they need to do. I'm just another player, another employee, like Ryan Zimmerman used to say. And he says about the fan reaction, he got a standing ovation first time at the plate. He said it means a lot. It kind of feels weird, too, because nothing's happened yet. We're still waiting. It's kind of cool at the same time, but kind of weird, too. Yeah, it is weird. But it's like this every year when you have speculation about a star player going. So we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and we see what happens. But, again, it appears that the Padres are in the lead right now, and that Josh Bell could be a part of what would be the biggest trade deadline deal in history. As I heard Buster Olney say, it would be like trading Willie Mays in 1955 in his prime. You're trading a player who could be a one of the premier players, if not the premier player in baseball for the next 10 to 15 years, and you're trading him away just as he's reaching his prime. He's 23 years old. I mean, 23 is when you expect prospects to get a look in the major leagues. And he's a veteran with a World Series ring and has emerged as one of the top players in baseball. And you just don't see this happen, but circumstances dictate that a deal is likely going to be done, and it's probably going to be done before 6 o'clock tonight. All right, the Deshaun Watson suspension of 6 games, and some of the details on this are really head-scratching, and it just goes to show you what a mess the NFL is when it comes to discipline. They had to change things in 2020 because the players didn't trust Roger Goodell, and in the new agreement that was signed between the league and the Players Association, that some of the power would be taken away from Goodell, and he would not make all the disciplinary decisions. The system was revised through the collective bargaining agreement and through a series of cases that have gone to Goodell's office over the years. They decided this is the best way to go, and they got a retired judge in Sue L. Robinson to make this decision. Now, there is this. Goodell can appeal this, but he's appealing it to himself. And if he does that, Watson and the NFL Players Association could sue if he faces a full season suspension while the appeals process is being completed, and that would put him back on the field. This would create really an embarrassing situation in that while this is going through the process, he's playing games, and that they might, again, have to yank him off the field. There's also this, and this was mentioned in her decision. It was a 16-page decision by Sue L. Robinson, that they looked at precedent not just for players, but precedent for owners, including Dan Snyder, Robert Kraft, and Jerry Jones. All of them had incidents involving either sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. Robinson wrote in her ruling, I'm reading from Mark Maskey's story, Robinson wrote in her ruling that the NFL proved its case on all 3 points it raised. The league proved, she wrote, that Watson committed sexual assault under the definition of the NFL the NFL provided of unwanted sexual contact with another person, that Watson engaged in conduct that posed a genuine danger to the safety and well-being of another person, and that Watson's behavior undermined or put at risk the integrity of the NFL. So all that was proven, that there was, in fact, sexual assault. But she wrote that it was not violent sexual assault. She called Watson's conduct predatory and wrote that as a condition of his reinstatement, it is appropriate for him to limit his massage therapy to club-directed sessions. Oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea. Not to go seeking out massage therapists like prostitutes, like it's what he apparently did here. But she also wrote that she was bound by the precedent of previous league-imposed suspensions. So herein lies the problem, that she was going on the basis of what the NFL has done in the past with incidents that have involved either sexual violence, sexual harassment, and so forth. And so, by saying, and this is, I don't know how you can say that there in fact was sexual assault. That she said the NFL proved that there was sexual assault, but it was nonviolent sexual assault. How can that be? Not Jeff Passan, but Andrew Brandt, who is an attorney, teaches law, I believe, at Villanova, and is a former executive with the Packers. He was on about an hour ago on ESPN Radio with Max Kellerman, and was asked about how he read the decision from Judge Sue L. Robinson and what his take was.
My first reaction was like everyone, it seemed light, and then I got into the opinion. And I'm reading the opinion as a lawyer, and I'm like, okay, this is going bad for Deshaun Watson, right? She, Judge Robinson, the independent hearing officer picked jointly by the league and the union, agrees with the NFL. They've met their burden of proof. He's a predator. He's egregious. There's sexual assault. That's in the opinion. And I'm reading this, and I'm going, wait a minute, how we get into 6 games with all this? The way it reads, it's going to be a year plus. And then I see the determination where it turns on a dime that this is nonviolent sexual assault. So I guess they're distinguishing. They don't mention any names from the Roethlisberger, Elliott, Kareem Hunt, Josh Brown, Ray Rice, because those were quote-unquote violent. And they say the most given out by the NFL for nonviolent has been 3 games. And we hear that's Jameis Winston for what he did with an Uber driver. So I'm trying to figure out, like everyone, so where does this turn to nonviolent? I'm sure this is triggering to so many that have reached out to me saying that, of course, it's violent. Of course, what he did is violent. And it screams out for an appeal. And as people may not know, or they probably do, if the NFL appeals, they're appealing to themselves. And they will increase the suspension. And they will probably give a fine if they appeal. So now people say, well, why wouldn't they appeal? Maybe they won't appeal for one of 2 reasons. Number one, they're respecting the process. They don't want to overreach into Judge Robinson on her first case. They are going to deal with her again. They've established this new process, and they will maybe show complete deference to her. Or number two, owners, not only Jimmy Haslam, owners come to Goodell and say, let's stop it. Let's just move on. Let's stop the conversation about this. Let's bring it on the field. So I know this, Max. I know if they appeal, this suspension will increase. But I don't know if they will.
It seems to me that you could bring in an outside arbitrator or arbiter of this whole thing because you want to rely less on precedent. Why then did she rely on precedent? For that, what do you need an independent judge for?
Great question. And I think part of her ruling is, part of what we're seeing here is that she is new and she is different. If this was ruled on by Judge Goodell, which it still may be, we would see a lot more, right? Because his baseline has been much bigger. I mean, his baseline has been 6, 8, 10 games. but her baseline is an unknown. And she may be talking to her husband or her best friend and saying, you know what, I just gave out a robust, harsh, severe penalty. She doesn't know. I mean, she probably thinks she gave out a very harsh penalty. And that's the difference.
So that is as good a synopsis in 3.5 minutes as I've heard on all of this. That's Andrew Brandt, who writes about sports business for SI.com and also teaches a course in business law at, I believe, Villanova. So he's well-versed in this and also has worked in the front office of the NFL. Now, a couple of things on an appeals, and Sally Jenkins wrote about this today. This is very important. If they appeal, and Andrew just gave you the reasons why they wouldn't, but if there is an appeal on this, then the league has to go in an open court and explain the difference between the treatment of Watson and how Daniel Snyder was treated for overseeing a franchise rife with sexual harassment, in that there was no report released on that. His team was hit with a $10 million fine, a team, by the way, just valued at close to $5 billion. So you have that up against this. And do they want that out in the open? Or, as Andrew said, let's just move on? It's going to be interesting because they have until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to make a decision on that. Also, as Sally writes in her column today, she says, as Robinson pointed out, in the NFL, by far the most commonly imposed discipline for domestic or gendered violence and sexual acts is a 6-game suspension. Only 2 players have been suspended for 8 games, one for multiple incidents of domestic violence and the second for the assault of multiple victims. So again, going on precedent, she says, and again, I don't know how you come up with nonviolent sexual assault, but she's saying based on precedent, and I'm a judge, this is what judges do. They don't get caught up in the emotion of this. This is what he should get. This goes back to Ray Rice getting 2 games for slugging his wife. Remember that, where all they had him was pulling her off the elevator, and then when the second video came out of him actually slugging her on the elevator, he was kicked out. But that was Goodell admitting, yeah, we made a mistake on that, so we're going to have somebody else look into this, and that's what they agreed to in the collective bargaining agreement. I'm going to read you one more paragraph from Sally, who I think gets this spot on. This is one of the best things I've read about this today. Sally Jenkins writing, the NFL is the victim of its own terrible mistakes in previously highly charged cases. It wound up with a judge who treated the question of Watson's penalty as she would a case in court and refused to exercise too much latitude. That is to be expected when you hire a retired federal judge. Good judges try not to wilt or bend with popular outrage. That's not a system, frankly, any of us would want to live in. As the NFL demonstrates, it's one that swiftly devolves into incoherence with penalties alternately cruel and toothless. And there it is. And, you know, this is the NFL. This is the NFL, which has had a long history of ignoring issues involving domestic violence, mistreating incidents that have involved domestic violence and sexual assault and so on. And based on how they've handled the owners, which is, you know, in her the decision that you look at Robert Kraft and Dan Snyder and Jerry Jones, tap on the wrist. Well, if you're a judge and you're looking at fairness here, this is what you come up with. Does it make any sense for a league that's trying to appeal to women? No, but maybe they don't care because the TV ratings are through the roof and the franchise's values keep going up and up and up. The Dallas Cowboys are worth $7.5 billion. $7.5 billion for a team that was purchased by Jerry Jones in 1989 for $189 million. Told, by the way, by Donald Trump, bad deal, don't do it. Coming up, I want you to hear what Ryan Kerrigan said to Bram Weinstein about the transition from player to what may be coach. We'll hear that as we continue. And also coming up, Greg Norman spills the beans on what he says Tiger turned down to join the Live Tour. That's coming up. It's the Andy Pollin Hour, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Hour on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Tony's coming up at 11 o'clock. Like you, I read and watched a lot of the tributes to Bill Russell yesterday. Many of them were very moving and told you some things about him that you may or may not have known. This I did not know, and I read Tom Lavero's column today. He read a book and then reread it yesterday or Sunday about Bill Russell after he learned of his death. It's called Second Wind, which he wrote with Taylor Branch, who later won a Pulitzer Prize for chronicling the life of Martin Luther King. And what Tom writes about in his column today is mostly the off-the-court stuff on Russell. And this is something that is really instructive about who he was as a person and how he grew up, and the way that he did not accept racism. I think that's what came out yesterday. That he's, and Bob Ryan said this well. He said that Russell said it was not a privilege to be a United States citizen. It was a birthright. And this little passage that Tom writes about is really moving to me. He talks about Russell's grandfather going to see him play in the NBA Finals and going into the locker room after the game. And Russell looks over at his grandfather, who was from the South. Russell, as you know, was born in Louisiana. When he was 9 years old, he moved with his family to the Oakland area, but the family had its roots in the South, and so did his grandfather, of course. And his grandfather, a black man, in the Celtics locker room after the game, and crying because he had seen John Havlicek, a white player, and Sam Jones, a black player, in the shower. And the grandfather said to his grandson, Bill Russell, "I never thought I'd live to see the day when water would run off a white man onto a black man, and the water would run off a black man onto a white man. I've been to church all my days, but I never thought I'd see anything like that." Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that something like that would bring a man to tears? Something that, you and I have accepted and never really thought anything of it. I played sports. I showered next to black people. That thought never crossed my mind that it would bring somebody to tears. But that's the world that Bill Russell grew up in, and his work off the court really as important as it was on the court, and he was the greatest winner of all time. So I really enjoyed what Tom wrote today, and really had not known that. That's a really incredible anecdote. All right, out at Ashburn, they got the pads on today. Pads, they're going to hit. They're actually going to hit. Football, especially during the Gibbs days, Gibbs won. They were known for hitting all the time. Different coaches had different philosophies on this. Bill Walsh with the 49ers didn't believe in hitting much during the week. He wanted to save that for the game. Both of them had great success, but now it's collectively bargained that there's only a few padded practices that you're allowed to have, and they're having one today. And the word from the beat reporters covering this on Twitter is that Curtis Samuel is not participating, and this is looking like a more and more precarious situation. They brought him in to be the number 2 receiver to Terry McLaurin last year, and he hardly played because of a lingering groin issue. Now, according to Ron Rivera, it's not a groin issue that's the problem that's keeping him away from practice. It's the overall football conditioning and shape, as he put it. He said this has nothing to do with last year's groin injury, yet he continues to miss practice after practice after practice. And, Rivera keeps saying they want to play it smart, and they've got a plan that they're putting together, and we got to be smart with it. But, we've seen this before, that some of these receivers are just so fragile that it just doesn't work out. And this could be, this could turn out to be a very bad free agent signing. It has been so far because he hardly gave him anything last year. They're hoping that, between he and Doxson and McLaurin, you've got a great receiving trio, but if he's not on the field, as they say, the old saying is, you can't make the club in the tub. Ryan Kerrigan was as durable as they come, 139 straight starts for Washington when he was here, both as a Redskin and his 1 year as a Washington football team player. And he talked to Bram Weinstein the other day at practice as he's sort of hanging around after announcing his retirement, kind of working to see if he's really interested in coaching. And Ron Rivera says he's letting him work with the defensive linemen and so forth to see how he feels, if he's got an itch still to scratch. And Bram discussed that with Kerrigan when they got together the other day.
With Ryan Kerrigan. This must be interesting to be back here today.
Yeah, it's very cool. I drove into the park today. Felt good to do that. I've made that drive so many times over the last decade, and come back here to see everybody and not have to worry about hitting anybody. That was kind of nice too.
What were you thinking about as you head into retirement? When you reflect on your career, what comes to mind for you?
I mean, I've been very fortunate to have had success and been able to have some really memorable moments. But I think just the relationships, the teammates, coaches, the guys in the kitchen, guys in the weight room, support staff, everybody, just all the relationships you build over the years. Those are what you take with you. And even just yesterday when after the news came out, hearing from certain people, it was just it was so cool. And just to, know that that me retiring mattered. That's cool to me.
Yeah. What do you think about records? I mean, you own a record here. As you kind of think through your 10 years playing here,
it almost doesn't seem real. It's hard to explain. Even though I've got to live this football life for the past 11 years, it almost doesn't seem real. I've been so fortunate. It's just been cool. It's been amazing. It's almost hard to put into words just because it's. You try to. Okay. You dream about as a kid playing professionally, and then it's even better than you think it would be. And so I've just been really lucky.
What were your expectations coming out of Purdue 11, 12 years ago? What did you think was going to happen?
Well, I think when you're a first round pick, you expect to be productive, and I expected that of myself. I would say it was more so going from high school to Purdue that I was where things were kind of oh, whoa, because you're going to college and anything can happen. And I became an All-American, had some really fun, memorable games and moments, and and so that was a big wow to me because I was such a Big Ten fan growing up, and getting to play in the Big Ten was crazy. But then, so I think when you're a first round pick, there's a level of expectation that others have, but you have for yourself as well. And you stop it, but I'll stop it. But so I just. I said it in my statement yesterday, but it's think about moments over the years, and it's man, I got to live those. That was pretty cool. Pretty dang cool.
What do you think about coming back here, and this is the Washington Commanders now?
I think it's cool. I mean, I know that's obviously has been a big talking point over the past, long time, but especially over the past couple of years as the change happened. But I think ultimately, if the team wins, people are going to be cool with the name. And, I think good things are happening here, and I hope good things continue to happen on the field.
All right, let me ask you about a couple of players here. Chase Young, I mean, obviously he's coming back from injury, so we'll see when he plays again, but you had 1 year of experience with him. What did you take away from that experience working with him, and what do you see for him in the future once he gets healthy again? Man,
I just want to see his potential maximized. That's before I'm an NFL player, I'm an NFL fan, and I'm a fan of guys like him who are generational talents, and I want to see his talent maximized because I think that'll be a special thing, not only for the fans here in Washington, but for the fans around the league. And so, I hope he first and foremost takes his time to get healthy. And by healthy, I don't mean available to play, but healthy in life, because that knee's going to be his knee for life. And so I hope he takes the time to fully get healthy, and then once he's able to play, I hope he just is awesome. I hope he is able to build on that awesome rookie year and go from there.
How about Montez Sweat? What do you see for him in the future here?
Man, I think he has a chance to be a superstar in this league. There aren't many 6'6", 260 guys that run like a DB, and I'll never forget his first training camp in 19. They had him doing a punt or a kickoff drill, which I don't know why, but I don't know why he's doing that. But I remember seeing him move, and I'm like, how does this dude this big move this way? And so I think if he can stay healthy and continue to commit himself every day, he's going to have he's going to have a long, productive, and lucrative career.
Yep. All right, two more, and then I'll let you go. You just played for the Eagles.
Yeah.
They made a lot of off-season moves.
Yeah.
They look good. What can you tell us about the Philadelphia Eagles?
Kind of like Washington, I feel like whatever hole they had last year, they filled it. And, playoff team last year, and so they're already good. They won 9 games, and I think they're going to be a formidable opponent. There's no way around it. They got a really great offensive line. I think Jalen Hurts is underappreciated kind of guy. He was.
That's interesting. He gets a lot of criticism specifically for his accuracy.
Right.
You see someone who might become a big time quarterback.
I think so. Obviously I love him as an athlete and as a player, but I think as a person too. You think about the situation he dealt with at Alabama, getting benched in the national title game. For him to come back and be as resilient as he has been from that. Like that, a lot of weaker-minded people would have not been able to do that. So I think he's going to be a stud. And then their receiving group's awesome, and they made some good moves at linebacker. So I think they're going to be a good team.
They are. All right, last thing, retirement's here. What are you going to do with it? What's the next move?
Well, today I'm going to head and have a couple beers, but you'll have to bear chase, have a couple beers, but no, I want to get into coaching. I want to stay in the game in some capacity, whether it's coaching or media. I think coaching would be more of the natural fit, just because I feel like I have a lot of good wisdom and I want to pass it on to guys. But I got to stay in the game in some capacity because football is what I know and it's what I love.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
So that's Ryan Kerrigan with Bram out at practice the other day. And one thing he didn't say at his news conference on Saturday when he was asked why he was retiring, it wasn't to spend more time with his family. Almost every athlete says that. He said it was because of his knee. Actually, he was told a year ago that the knee was in bad shape and he shouldn't play, but he squeezed another year out with Philadelphia and was even thinking about playing another year when he started to train for this year and realized, it's not going to work. But he, to his credit, he didn't say, I'm going to spend more time with his family. But it sounds like he's spending more time with his family. He's got 3 young daughters, and you heard them, or at least one of them, during the conversation with Bram. Bram, by the way, does Commanders Daily as part of his show every day from 5:30 to 6. So, and he's had, over the last week since camp has opened, he's had a player or a coach on every day. So we'll hear what happens today, 5:30 to 6 right here on ESPN 630. All right, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods has been very outspoken about the LIV Tour and has defended the PGA Tour. This little nugget that came out last night in an interview that Tucker Carlson had on his show with Greg Norman tells me that, yes, Tiger is putting his money where his mouth is when he is critical of LIV and supportive of the PGA. This, again, Greg Norman, who's heading up the LIV. He's the CEO. He's the one who's luring all these players to come play for incredible amounts of money. Tucker Carlson, about the cash that Tiger turned down.
Keep reading that you offered Tiger Woods $700, $800, $1 billion, some unknown number to join LIV. Is that true?
That number was out there before I became CEO. So that number's been out there, yes.
Yeah.
And look, Tiger's a needle mover, right?
Yeah.
So of course you're going to look at the best of the best, So they had originally approached Tiger before I became CEO. So, yes, that number is somewhere in that neighborhood.
Wow. So just imagine that. Just imagine saying no to that amount of money. Now, when you have a lot of money, and Tiger is reportedly a billionaire, you can do that with a little bit more ease than you or I could. But still, I mean, that's impressive. And the way the wind seems to be blowing right now, I don't know if the PGA is going to be able to exist in the way it exists now as something of a monopoly, and the LIV might be here to stay. That nobody could anticipate a business model like this, where making a profit doesn't mean anything, where you have endless amounts of money to spend, and that's what the Saudis have here. Now, politically, you can make an argument you shouldn't be doing that, and Tiger is. In fact, he supported the R&A's decision not to invite Norman, who was a 2-time winner, to the 150th celebration of the Open, which took place last month. He said that was the right decision to do that. And as Norman said, the PGA Tour is a monopoly, and it creates obstacles that has caused LIV to alter its plans. They announced that they're going to 14 tournaments next year with 48 players competing on 12 established team franchises for, here it is, $405 million in cash, not to mention the guaranteed money. And that's not, they didn't say to Tiger, hey, if you win a couple of tournaments, we'll give you $700 million. That's, we'll give you $700 to $800 million to go to the tour. So, there are those who take a stand on principle, and there are those who take a stand big financial hit. Not that his lifestyle would have improved dramatically if he got another $700 or $800 million. But, as they say, you can't be too rich or too thin. I'm not in any way supporting the LIV Tour here. I'm more or less applauding Tiger for standing up for something that he believed in at a great financial cost to him. He could have taken this money and the way things are going, that would have blown over, I think. I don't think Tiger would have been vilified. Now, he could also look at the long term, and he could see what Michael Jordan is doing long into retirement, making tons and tons of money off of Nike selling his line. And Tiger may still benefit from that after he finishes playing golf. He probably will, maybe not to the level that Jordan does, because many more people are buying sneakers than buying golf shirts and things like that. But still, that was Tiger standing up and saying no, according to what Norman said, $700 to $800 million. Coming up, Jerry Jones still petty about Jimmy Johnson. We'll get to that as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Hour, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Hour on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Yeah, that was quick. I don't put the brakes into the system, but that's what we had, a little 30-second little stoppage there, and we're rolling towards 11 o'clock. We're at the Tony Show. Tony's doing a show on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. Undecided, as far as I know, right now about Thursday or Friday, but is going to do a show tomorrow, and he's got a show coming up today. We're waiting to see what happens with Juan Soto. The trade deadline, 6 o'clock, so we're 7 hours plus on that. And the latest is that the Padres have emerged as the favorite, and that Josh Bell would be included in the deal, which would be somewhat similar to last year when Max Scherzer was traded at the deadline to the Dodgers along with Trey Turner, that you have to include another player in this. Now, the Bell situation is a little bit different than Turner, who had a year and a half left under team control. Bell is going to become a free agent at the end of the season, as Scherzer was at the end of last season. That's why he's with the Mets now. But they would get the big prize at the trade deadline. They would get Juan Soto, and they would have him for 3 pennant races. And, the way things are going with the Padres, it looks like they are going for it. It looks like this is the year that they think they can do it. They make the trade for Josh Hader yesterday. And I don't think they make the Hader deal unless their full intention is to get Soto. And what Jeff Passan reported last night is that the prospects they gave up in the Hader deal were not the ones that the Nationals are after. The prime prospects that they need to get in a deal like this, those are the ones they want, and they did not go to the Brewers in that trade, and presumably are still available if in fact they can make that deal. So we'll keep an eye on that, and reportedly the Cardinals and the Dodgers are still in the mix, but we have a lot of time. And this is one of those deals, I believe, that it's possible 6 o'clock will come, there will be no announcement, and then within the hour, as they finalize things, we'll find out that he's been dealt. Mets and Nats are supposed to play at 7 o'clock. So, I think it'll be a tell if he's not in the lineup. Soto rarely misses a game, and he had a home run last night. I don't think if he's still a National that they will hold him out. But, given how things are so crazy, and maybe, in a mental situation, they might want to just sit him out and possibly use him, come in as a pinch hitter or something like that. But right now, that is the report, that it would be Bell and Soto both dealt at the deadline, and that the Padres would be the destination. I stumbled across this yesterday. They're talking about some of the crazy trades that have been made, not necessarily at the deadline, but it's always fun to look at some of these. Lefty Grove, Hall of Famer, 300 wins in the major leagues, pitched for the Philadelphia A's. When he was 20 years old, he was pitching for the Martinsburg Mountaineers, a Class D team, West Virginia, and they had a storm, and their fence was blown down. They wanted to get a new fence. So Jack Dunn, who had previously signed Babe Ruth to his first professional contract and owned the minor league Baltimore Orioles, agreed to buy Lefty Grove from the Mountaineers for about $3,000, which was the price of a new fence. So a Hall of Famer traded for a fence. Broadcaster trade. This is the only time in history we've had a broadcaster traded for a player. Dodgers announcer Red Barber had to take a leave from the team in 1948 due to a bleeding ulcer, and Branch Rickey, the same Branch Rickey, of course, signed Jackie Robinson, found a replacement in Ernie Harwell, who was calling minor league games for the Atlanta Crackers. The Crackers, though, wanted a player in return for giving up Red Barber. So the Dodgers sent Cliff Dapper, then a catcher from their Class A team in Montreal, and sent him to the Crackers, where he was a player manager, batted .281, and then I guess was out of baseball after that. Dapper and Ernie Harwell met up in 2002. So again, he was traded in 1948. So half a century later, they finally meet up, and that happened to be the year that Ernie Harwell retired as the longtime Tigers announcer. He later died of cancer. Was a great man, a great announcer, and I never met him, but those who did say he was just a wonderful guy in person. We've had players traded for themselves. You know, sometimes you hear about the player to be named later. Sometimes it's the same guy. Catcher Harry Cheedy was the first player in history to be traded for himself, sent from the Mets for a utility player to be named later, April 62, only to get him back on June 15th. 1980, the Yankees traded catcher Brad Golden to the Mariners, and Golden returned to New York a year later. Pitcher Dickie Knowles was sent from the Cubs to the Tigers just 33 days in 87 before being returned to Chicago. We've had that. And this is the trade to end all trades. And I often celebrate the anniversary of that, which we're coming up, by the way, 40 years ago. Mike Kekich and Fritz Peterson traded wives and families. They moved into each other's homes. They were both pitchers on the Yankees. And during spring training of 1973, they announced in separate press conferences that they were swapping lives. Not swapping wives, but swapping lives. Each moved into the other's homes. This was, obviously a scandalous thing in 1973. I guess still would be. Baseball Commissioner Bowie Kuhn said, "I deplore what happened, and I'm appalled at the effect it'll have on young people." Kekich was traded to Cleveland in June of that year, and he ultimately split up with Peterson's former wife. Peterson, a one-time All-Star in 1970, also traded to Cleveland a season later. Peterson and the former Suzanne Kekich are still married, so it worked out for at least one of the swaps there, but the other, predictably, did not work out so well. So you may have heard this last year. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Cowboys, finally said, okay, it's time to put Jimmy Johnson in the Ring of Honor. They have a Ring of Honor around the stadium in Dallas, and he said this during the 2021 Hall of Fame game, and Jones has dragged his feet on this. So this is over about a year ago, said, oh, yeah, we're going to put him in the Ring of Honor, and nothing has happened. So training camp is open, and the Cowboys are one of relatively few teams now that don't hold it at their own facility. They've been holding it in Thousand Oaks, California, I don't know, maybe for 60 years. Seems like it's been forever. And they're back out there this year. And Newey Scruggs is a reporter with the NBC affiliate there. And he got the usual training camp interview. Jones probably makes time for each of the stations. So when he sat down with Scruggs, to his credit, asked the question that a lot of people want to know about Jimmy Johnson.
It seems very petty of what's going on between you and Jimmy from the standpoint that he's not in that Ring of Honor, because when you think about the Hall of Fame and you think about those championships, I'm just saying that's how it comes off to people. Yeah. Because there's you two together. You guys rebuilt that Cowboy dynasty that Tom Landry had.
Let me just, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's BS for anybody to be making anything. I've said I'm going to put him in. Now, when I put him in, and the circumstances and what I do with that, there's a lot more than Jimmy to think about here. And I've got a lot of other lives out here that have laid a lot on the line on the field that need to be in that Ring of Honor as well. And so how I do that, what I do it with, I get to make that decision, and it isn't at the end of the day all tailored around whether Jimmy's snibbling or not.
It is your franchise. You do get to make the decision.
Well, and I'll be very sensitive and be very appreciative of what Jimmy is, but it's too much to say, well, that is the thing that gets up and goes to bed at night when we think about the Ring of Honor as to Jerry and Jimmy's relationship. Okay? Jerry and Jimmy were the two of the luckiest guys that's ever been on this earth to get to be sitting here having this talked about, if you want to know the truth about it.
It isn't, at the end of the day, all tailored around Jimmy's sniveling or not. Did I hear anything? Did you hear anything about Jimmy sniveling about not being in the Ring of Honor? I mean, come on. Jerry, you got to get over this. Don Van Natta, who is a great investigative reporter for ESPN, wrote a long piece about Jerry, and it goes back probably 7 or 8 years. But the gist of it is Jerry wants the credit for building a Super Bowl winner. What happened was it was a great partnership at the beginning. They'd been college teammates at Arkansas. They were on a national championship team together. They had remained friends, remained close. Jerry made a ton of money in the oil business, and Jimmy became a very, very successful college coach, won a national championship at Miami. So when Jerry bought the Cowboys in 1989, he had to go through the tough thing, and this is not something anybody wants to do, but he had to go through firing Tom Landry, who was the only coach the Cowboys had ever had. And even though the teams had started to take a nosedive, he was still very, very revered in Dallas. And this was not an easy thing to do. But Jerry did it, and he hired Jimmy Johnson. And it was great. They won back-to-back Super Bowls. But there started to be trouble before the second Super Bowl. Jerry, always looking for publicity and loving the camera, invited the ESPN cameras into the war room as the draft was going on. And Jimmy headed up the draft. He'd done a great job in the Herschel Walker trade of getting draft picks in return and using those draft picks incredibly well to build that Super Bowl roster. And as the story goes, Jerry said to Jimmy, when you get ready to make the pick, you need to come over and consult me so it seems on camera if I'm involved. And that really rankled Jimmy. And that started a downhill, roll, I guess you could say. And then they did win a second Super Bowl. But at the owners' meeting after that Super Bowl, Jerry had a few, and in the bar he said to some reporters, I could get 500 other guys to coach my team and win a Super Bowl. And that filtered out, and to Jerry's credit, he didn't deny it the next day, but that was the beginning of the end. And Jimmy resigned with the players that Jimmy had brought in, with the team he had built. In comes Barry Switzer, what did Randy Galloway call him? A Coach Gunslinger or something like that. I mean, he was just Gunsmoke, Coach Gunsmoke. And he was known for, showing up at the facility like 10 o'clock in the morning. He once got stopped at security in the airport because he had a gun in his carry-on. I mean, he was a great college coach, but, he wasn't really equipped. But he had such great talent, he won a Super Bowl. And Jerry never got the credit he wanted for that. Even though that one was not won by Jimmy, people said, yeah, but Jimmy built that team. And in that post-game interview, you've probably heard this clip before, you hear Barry Switzer say, are you happy now, Jerry? Are you happy? Meaning, Jimmy didn't win this one. Maybe you did. But he's still chasing that, and he's still got this thing with Jimmy that he's not getting enough credit. It's just ridiculous, but that's what it is. It is what it is. One more story. I just this crossed earlier this morning that the National Women's Soccer League, the D.C. team, is the defending champions in that D.C. Spirit. Although they're having a bad year this year, they're the defending champions. And the league is now in some financial trouble because one of its biggest sponsors, cryptocurrency platform Voyeur Digital, has filed for bankruptcy. And the deal that they announced with the league in December, half the value of the agreement was set to be paid in cash, the other half designated for individual players to invest in cryptocurrencies via the Voyager platform. This is according to Sportico. The company is now entering Chapter 11. The status of the funds designated for the players is unclear as their accounts were never funded. The executive director for the National Women's Soccer League, she said that no players will be missing paychecks. Well, I've heard that before. I've worked for companies that have been on the brink of bankruptcy, have filed for bankruptcy. I know what that's like. The league did not receive the cash payment it was due as part of the agreement. And Sportico reported, and Voyager's signage remains present at venues around the league as they go through the bankruptcy process. A resolution from the league's perspective could be months away. So this is a league teetering, and we have seen women's leagues go out of business before. You may remember this. There was a launch of one right after the 1999 World Cup where Brandi Chastain took off her shirt, and a lot of people were jazzed up about women's soccer. And we had a team that played at RFK with Mia Hamm, and they drew 35,000 for the first game. But as time went on, attendance dwindled, the TV contract wasn't very good, and the league went out of business. This one may survive. They got a great place to play here at Audi Field, so maybe they will make it, and there is more and more interest in women's soccer as our national teams have had this kind of success in the Olympics and so forth. But again, when you make a deal with a cryptocurrency company and they file for bankruptcy, that's a big chunk of change. And it's not the NFL, it's the National Women's Soccer League. So we'll keep an eye on their financial health as time goes by. Got a Tony show today, got a Tony show tomorrow, and I'll keep you informed for the rest of the week. But one thing for sure, I will be back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. Enjoy the rest of the day.